Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the shadows of one of the absolute darkest, most harrowing legal cases in recent Ugandan history. We're going to examine the grim details and the legal aftermath of the Okello Onyum tragedy. Now, fair warning up front, this explainer deals with some profoundly heavy true crime subject matter. We're looking at the absolute darkest edges of human behavior and exactly how the justice system responds to it. All right, let's dive right in. Let's actually start right at the climax of this whole thing. April 30, 2026. Quote, sentenced to die by hanging. Hearing those words, those were the exact heavy stakes delivered by the High Court. It's the kind of phrase designed to completely freeze a courtroom in its tracks. We are looking at the ultimate, final penalty the law can possibly provide. Section 1, the final judgment, the weight of the High Court's decision. You know, the tension in that makeshift courtroom in Ggaba was just thick. The court wasn't there to figure out if he did it. That fact had already been unequivocally established. The air was entirely silent because they were weighing the ultimate scale, life versus death. And the sentence? It was handed down with staggering speed. There wasn't some long wait or months of deliberation. The court concluded 3 very specific things. These were deliberate actions against defenseless victims, carried out with extreme brutality. The evidence was just so overwhelming and the nature of the crime so shockingly severe that the judge literally needed almost no time to reach a final, devastating conclusion.
Section 2. Timeline of a tragedy. Tracing the calculated steps.
So how exactly does a situation escalate to a death sentence that fast? Let's rewind the narrative a few weeks back to April 2nd, 2026. The court viewed this horrific act not as a sudden accident, but as entirely 100% premeditated. Just look at this timeline. Minute 1, Christopher Okello Onyum walks right into the daycare and pretends to enroll a child. Minute 15, he actually pays money, completely cementing his cover story, and then he just waits. By minute 30, he locks the gate. The trap is securely set. And at minute 35, the unthinkable attack begins. This sequence proved to the court that this was a totally methodical execution of a plan that turned a safe haven into an absolute nightmare. And here is the most devastating part of this entire documentary-style explainer. 4. The victims of this meticulously calculated timeline were 4 completely defenseless toddlers. Every single one of them was under the age of 3. I mean, just think about that for a second. They were barely able to speak, let alone run away or defend themselves against a grown man with knives. It's the ultimate vulnerability, and it's the core reason the justice system reacted with such uncompromising severity.
Section 3. The failed defense, dismissing insanity.
Right, so you might be wondering, how on earth does a defense attorney even try to approach a case like this when the facts are so heavily stacked against them? Well, faced with undeniable physical evidence, Onyum's last and only chance was a desperate attempt to claim insanity. But medical testimony completely dismantled that plea. The clinical experts testified that Onyum was totally coherent. He was fully aware of his surroundings, he knew exactly what he was doing, and he was entirely capable of explaining his actions after the fact. The perpetrator was completely lucid, which firmly slammed the door shut on any psychological defense his lawyers tried to mount. On top of that, the attacker's own statements to the authorities ultimately sealed his fate. His words suggested a totally clear motive, not confusion. He wasn't lost in some sort of psychological break from reality. He knew his intent. In the eyes of the court, clarity of motive equals clarity of mind. So an insanity defense, it was literally impossible to uphold. Section 4. Spectacle of justice, a community watching. Let's step out of the strict legal jargon for a moment and actually look at the environment where this all went down. Because this legal drama unfolded in a highly unusual and intensely public setting. It wasn't tucked away in some quiet, sterile downtown courthouse. No, the trial was held in a mobile court tent, pitched right near the actual crime scene in Ggaba. Imagine the psychological weight of that. Placing the formal legal process mere steps from where the tragedy occurred turned a standard trial into a profound, raw, and highly emotional public spectacle. The contrast here is just wild. On one side, we have this incredibly intimate, small-scale tragedy, 4 defenseless toddlers inside a tiny daycare. But on the other side, this immense public spectacle. You have hundreds of vocal community members crowding around the tent, fiercely demanding justice, or, frankly, straight up demanding death. The difference between the quiet vulnerability of the victims and the roaring anger of the massive crowd is a really striking visual of a nation watching. Section 5. The reality of execution. Uganda's justice system. So the judge has banged the gavel and the crowd has heard the sentence of death. But what does that actually mean within Uganda's justice system today? What happens after that tent is packed up and gone? Well, the state doesn't apply this ultimate punishment lightly. The Ugandan court reserves death by hanging for incredibly strict criteria. The crime must be exceptionally brutal, it has to be completely premeditated, and the offender must be deemed beyond rehabilitation. As we've seen from the timeline and the medical reports, this specific crime checked off every single one of those boxes.
But, and this is a big but, here is where the strict legal verdict slams into systemic reality. The verdict is definitive, right? Sentenced to death by hanging. But the systemic truth? Uganda hasn't actually carried out an execution in years. Passing a death sentence in a tent in Ggaba is a very different thing from actually opening up the gallows.
So what is the actual path for Christopher Okello Onyum moving forward? It's definitely not an immediate walk to the rope. It looks a lot more like this. Step 1, he's going to sit on death row, joining many others in a state of indefinite limbo. Step 2, he'll likely enter a very lengthy, complex appeals process. And step 3, if executions remain paused by the state, he faces the potential commutation of his sentence. That gavel strike, it was really just the beginning of a very long, bureaucratic waiting game. So we're left with this lingering question. Will Christopher Okello Onyum actually face the rope, fulfilling the demands of the public outside that tent? Or is he simply going to become another forgotten name waiting in the dark on death row? 4 children are gone, a country is left trying to understand how this could even happen, and a man just waits. It forces all of us to ask what justice really looks like when the immediate spectacle of a courtroom fades into the quiet, slow reality of a prison system. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning and keep seeking to understand the systems around us.